hands. Good evening and welcome. It's an honor to once again have a wonderful guest lecture, and it's especially great that we don't have to go far for our presenters tonight, and we don't need much of an introduction. It's an honor to have our Gabbai, Mr. Petersile, to share his recollections from the Shtetl, and we're very grateful to the Holland family, and in particular to Hillary for spearheading this evening, for hosting it, and for agreeing to moderate and to be our interviewer as we go through this most interesting and crucial conversation. As we all know, there are not that many people that live through the Shtetl, and even less so people that remember. And Mr. Petersile for a long time has been honoring us by sharing his recollection of every minute detail of the Shtetl. And tonight we make it public on Facebook and to all of you, and we're very honored to have you all. So thank you, Mr. Petersile. Thank you, Hillary. Thank you, the Hollands. Thank you all for being here. And with that, I guess Hillary will give you the mic and you'll begin the conversation. Toda raba.
Thank you everyone for coming. I'm so happy to be here in our home to share this experience with us. It's going to be just people having a conversation. I wrote down some very specific questions to guide the conversation in a specific way. Rabbi Label had a specific vision for how the conversation would progress. And Mr. Petersile is a wealth of information on a very important time period. And so hopefully I'll be able to cover everything that maybe you're all interested in. And if at the end I haven't, we can maybe ask Mr. Petersile some questions as well. So while we're discussing things, maybe think of something that you'd like to ask yourself. So with that, we'll get started. Okay. So the first thing that I really would like to know is, who are you? Who are your parents? Who is your family? Your brothers and sisters? Your aunts and uncles? Your family? Who was it?
I am from Poland, Dąbrowa Tarnowska. When I was a young boy, when I went to school, they called it Dąbrowa Koło Tarnowa. That means Poland had another town that was also called Dąbrowa. This was not far from the German border. The other Dąbrowa was called Dąbrowa Górnicza. Our Dąbrowa was called Dąbrowa Koło Tarnowa. But later, they changed it. Instead, I remember when I was around 10 years old, they didn't call it no more Dąbrowa Koło Tarnowa. Koło Tarnowa means next to Tarnowa. Koło means nearby. They called it Dąbrowa Tarnowska. This meant it's like part of Tarnova already. It was 19 kilometers. But
Away.
Our Tarnova was a big city. Dąbrowa was a town. And our Tarnova was 19 kilometers from the big city. In Europe, 19 kilometers was very far away because mostly you traveled with horse wagon. If you had a bicycle, this was considered one of the fastest transportation if you could go with a bicycle. But mainly transportation was with horse wagons. Now, my family was a very famous family in Dąbrowa Tarnowska. My great-grandfather was Dąbrowa Danin. You see, every town had a main roof that the town, there was like, each town had like a government, a Jewish government. And if two Jewish people had a problem, they didn't go to the court. They went to the Adintoilam. That means to the rabbi. My father was, when they went for Adintoilam, my father was very highly educated in the Jewish law. He was sitting in with a main roof, for judgment, for the town. Because the town had approximately 5,000 Jewish people or Jewish families. It was at least more than 50% Jewish.
Okay.
My great-grandfather, because I did not know him, was actually each town had a dain in the roof. because when you went when you bought a chicken, you had to go to the slaughterhouse to, verschachten. This was owned by the town, by the Jewish, community. If you had a shala, when you brought home the chicken, and it was Friday in the morning, and if you had a shala, something didn't look like kosher, you went to the roof, and he had to check it, and either he made it kosher or he made it right. When the roof wasn't available, you went to the dyeing. So this was so my father had two professions, and he couldn't make a living from the two professions. One was that he was teaching actually for the Talmud Torah. He was also teaching the boys was to read the Hebrew mainly for being able to pray, for davening. But then when he went to a higher learning, he went already to learn Chemish Rashi, then he had to learn Gimel Methosis. Now, my oldest brother was 13 years old. He went to Tarnova already.
How many younger were you?
I had two older brothers.
Okay.
My oldest one and a middle one.
Okay.
None of survived. I'm the only one. I have the house here that my parents' house had a picture. So, to explain, my father was teaching, and he was also dealing with grain, a grain buyer from the farmers. He wasn't a wholesaler, he was buying from the farmers. I can show you the house. The house was made in the front, the living quarters. In the back, that you cannot see it on the picture, I got it here. Or you can even have it on the computer if you want to put in. You can see the shul from Domrova. We had a very famous big shul. The shul belonged to the city, to the town. This was the main shul. And so they said he was away for 6 years. My oldest brother, from the age of, he was born in 1920. My middle brother was born in 1922. I don't know the dates, and I don't know the months, because we didn't keep birthdays. So nobody knew. I only know my birthday because for the school, I had to tell them the birthday.
So you were the
But
baby.
I know only my oldest brother was at 1920, my middle brother was 22, and I don't know which month, and I don't know which day.
So you were the baby then.
I was the youngest one. But I was the youngest, but my middle brother, my parents considered him like he's not such a strong one. So whenever they needed something, they asked me, because my oldest brother was away for 6 years, from the age of 13, and he was 4 years older than I, so I was 9 years older already, but they wouldn't ask my middle brother to do anything, because he couldn't do it. He's like, they kept him like not strong enough. So when they needed water to bring from the middle of the town, so show him along. So bring water. So I had to go with the 2 pails to bring the water. They need to chop the wood, everything me. I was doing everything. And even and I had the guilt. I already felt also that I have to take care of my older brother. Because the first camp, we were captured both together to Puskov. This was approximately end of 1940, or beginning of 41. And I took care of him in the camps. I watched after him. He was older. When we went to work, he came home. Anyway, my father was a scholar. And when I was 13 years old, they sent me also to Tarnova to learn. I was 1 year away, and then I didn't want no more, and I said, I want to come back home. So I think in 38, I came back home.
Were your parents and your grandparents, they were
all from the same town,
all from the same town?
Because my father was actually David Ehrlich. I was supposed to be Ehrlich, not Petersile. The reason I am Petersile, because my whole family from my father's side, Alter Mendel Ehrlich was my grandfather, the Earl family is from my hometown. The reason my father had an older brother, he was Ehrlich. His children were Ehrlich, even when they went to school in the same town. But my father, they changed to Petersile. Petersile was my father's mother's maiden name. Because when my grandfather got married, not my father, they didn't record it in it was Austria in those years. Because before World War One, it belonged to Austria, the whole area there. So when Poland came into being, they drafted him to the army. He was first in the Austrian army in World War One. Then the Austria lost the war with Germany. They made a Poland, so Poland drafted him to the army. He had to bring a birth certificate. He couldn't find a birth certificate because everybody was born in the houses. Nobody was born in a hospital. There was no hospitals. So what happened? They couldn't find his birth certificate, so they named my father after his mother. His mother's maiden name was a Petersile. That's why I'm Petersile. And that's how we went to school. So my father's children were all
His
brothers, all
all
children.
Ireland.
I still had. They went to one cousin survived. So my father's, he died already, but he survived. He went to Israel. He has a son in Israel. I'm the earliest. He's an attorney there. They're all the earliest. So anyway, my family was a very educated in Jewishness in Poland, in my hometown.
And your mother?
My mother was actually had the house that I have in here. Let me show it to you. Which one? Dąbrowa Tarnowska. That's how they read it. No, this is near Tarnowa. Tarnowa was a big city. Tarnowa had a streetcar
It's still there.
and electric. Tarnowa was a big city. Dąbrowa at that time didn't have any electric. They brought in electricity when I was approximately 11 years old, I remember. But not the houses, this is the house. See, this is the front of the house, still there.
Right.
In the back, about that
Yeah, you
much.
can see the light, the telephone.
Yeah.
Electricity.
I remember this is poles that they brought in electricity. There was the area where we had the grain storage. Here was a little street. I can still see a stop sign from the little street. But this is the house is still there. My son made it from
Can I pass this around?
Yeah. But, yeah, the town is a Jewish town, a lot of people. He has the shul. This is the dome of the shul, the main shul.
So tell us a little bit more about your town and
My
what it was
town,
like.
before the war, I was away for 1 year when I from the age of 13 to 14. But 14, I came home. And when I was 15, the war broke. The Germans came in already. The Germans occupied. Every morning I went to school, from school, and I had the help at home, whatever we needed at home.
You were inHeder or you were in
Well,
regular
first
school?
it started, there was no kindergarten. First I went to aHeder, the teacher. Then I went to a higher grade, and also to public school.
Did they let you into public school?
Oh no, my time they had to go. This was Poland. When I grew up, when I was born, was already Poland. And Poland had already public schools.
Okay.
Before World War One, it was Austria, and there was no public schools. So 90% of the people who were born my father's age didn't know to write and read. But very few people were educated in this age for my father's age.
Okay.
Because he only had to go to a private school to be able to learn. There was no public school. The only people who knew, they knew only to davening, because there was a idea that whoever couldn't pay, the town paid.
So what language were they speaking? Were they speaking
Yiddish.
Polish?
Oh, no, I
No,
couldn't
in the
speak
public school.
Polish. We had to speak
So you're
Polish.
speaking Polish.
I couldn't speak Polish till I started school.
Really?
Only Yiddish.
Okay.
And the Jewish people, there was no Polish. Everything was in Yiddish. The only thing, the reason the people spoke Polish, because you had to do business with the Polish people. The farmers couldn't speak only Polish when they brought the merchandise for selling. So yeah, and the children couldn't speak Polish till we started to go to school. So I was never good in Polish, and I'm still not good. I know to write Polish, and I know to read Polish, but I don't understand everything. It's just that I was davening. We also didn't understand everything in Hebrew. I know to spell Polish, and I know to write Polish. I opened my hometown. You see here, this is the shul. And they showed certain things from Poland, from Dąbrowa. They had speeches. They had a speech when they opened. I couldn't understand. But I could read Polish, and I could read books in Polish. I understood. I forgot already most of it because I wasn't that good. The language that remained was the Yiddish language. This was the language that we spoke in Poland, not just my town, the whole area there, the Jewish people. But everybody knew Polish because otherwise you couldn't do any business.
Well, so let me ask you. So when you needed to go to the doctor, when you needed to buy bread,
Well,
at
you
the
don't
bakery,
went to doctors.
was there a doctor? There was no doctor.
Bread,
So
everything.
when
The
you went,
stores
when you had,
was only
was there a
Jewish.
grocery store?
Yeah, there was grocery stores, but only the Jewish people had the grocery stores.
Okay.
Jewish owners who had the grocery store. So you went to them. Everything was in Yiddish. But the non-Jews, the farmers who came from the villages, and they brought their merchandise to sell. You had to speak Polish with them. And they bought in the Jewish stores stuff what they took home every day. People had to know Polish, but the Polish was only from talking, from dealing with the people. So the Polish wasn't the language, but don't forget, till World War I was German. The people didn't speak German there. This was all real Poland, but the government who ruled the area was everything in German. That's why my father couldn't write Polish. My father could write only German, from the World War I, and in Yiddish. And I could write, I went already to the regular public school, and to the Haide, and I also know to write Yiddish and with the Hebrew letters, because I went through all those schooling, the whole schooling. But this was only my generation. The ones who were, like 15 years, 15 years older than I, didn't know much because they were still in the house. Poland was only a young country when I was born. I was born in 24, and Poland was only into being in 19. Poland was only 5 years old, but in Poland, they established a public school, and you have to go to school. I remember one time winter, I was sick, and I was in bed for about 2 weeks, and I couldn't go to school. A policeman came by, I'm not in school.
Really?
Yeah, you have to go. The school was mostly Jewish boys, and also some farmers' boys, non-Jewish boys from the intelligentsia, they were also going to school, to public school. The farmers' boys had a problem because winter they couldn't go to school because they had no shoes. Even the Jewish boys, the young boys, when it came winter, when it came summer, we didn't wear shoes no more. We walked around barefoot because you had to save the shoes. We only got a pair of shoes once a year for Pesach, and then you got to watch them just to wear them when it was snow or cold. There was heavy winters. So during the summer, as soon as it got to the grown-up people, like my father wouldn't walk barefoot, he had to shoes. But children, right? We didn't make a big one this year.
So I wanted to also ask, when there was a simcha, a wedding, what was it like?
I remember only one wedding in the town. My uncle's married office always saw there. So the wedding was in a house. They hired somebody and they were baking geese and the whole town came to the wedding. Everybody came to eat. They were hungry. It wasn't, it's very hard to explain this nightlife because
So on Shabbos,
Shabbos, doing the week didn't matter what you ate. But for Shabbos, you always try to buy a chicken. Friday morning, the farmers brought to the middle of the town was the marketplace. They stood with chickens, and the women, the mothers went out to buy the chicken. They could stay a whole hour to save 10 cents. Arguing about the things to save 10 groschen. Then after she got the chicken, like my mother bought the chicken, she ran away after me. I actually got to the slaughterhouse. I had this more than a kilometer to go, and then I had to pay, and they shot the chicken. Then we had to bring it home and to take off the fat ass to flicken into Mackenkuche. And everything had to be done best to be able to have a Shabbos. For Shabbos, she baked Shabbos. Shabbos, when we went Friday night to shul, we came home, we were sitting by the table, everybody got their share to eat. But you didn't eat how much you wanted, you just ate how much they got, how much they gave you. It wasn't like they put it on a table and you will take what. Not such a thing. But angeteilt, the woman had to prepare. You get this. I used to get this, and my brother got this. One got the ring, and one got. That's how it was.
So, Shalom on Shabbos?
Shabbos we went to shul.
Okay.
Then, Friday evenings, we brought to the bake. You didn't bake at home anything. You brought it to the bakery.
So your mother would
prepared it, the house, then she took it to the baker and she put it on the floor. The baker wasn't far from where we lived.
She would take it on Friday.
Friday she
Okay.
You didn't have a stove?
Well,
You didn't have an oven at home?
but we didn't. The oven was only used in Pesach. The Pesach, the kasher, to make a cake, a Pesach cake. When you baked a cake in Pesach, it was a big job because there was no electric. You had to use forks to make the snow. And it took hours till you made the snow with 2 forks, to beat the white to make the snow.
Who made the matzah on Pesach?
The bake, we had 5 Jewish bakers. 2 bakers always announced. The bakers got together every year. 2 other bakers kasher their ovens. Like 3 weeks before, they didn't bake any bread anymore. They're gonna bake matzahs, and that's how this whole the matzahs. 2 bakers. I can bake matzahs, or 1 baker only. And then they hired young women to make the little, there was one man they hired to make the dough and to make the little things. They had a little machine that they made the matzahs by hand, It looked like a wringer machine, what you imagine. The old wringer machines where you wash clothes. Similar like this at home. They let the little dough in, and the other one let the dough back, and this was into the oven. It's very hard to explain the style life. You cannot explain it unless you live through it,
And they made the holes with a fork, right? The
What?
matzah, they made the holes with a fork.
No. They had, they must have from an old clock, a wheel that has the little teeth. They fixed it up with a handle, and they made it back and forth. This was that shouldn't blow up.
So one of the most important questions that I wanted to ask you, because my grandmother is also alive, she's from Romania.
Yeah.
And Eli was also something very, very similar. I had an opportunity to speak with him once. grandmother also said sort of the same thing, and I always wondered what it was like because my grandmother and Ellie Zoe were from villages that were very close to each other.
Yeah.
And so, how did you get your news? When were there newspapers? How did you hear about what was going on in the world?
Most people couldn't read. So there was no radio.
Yeah, but no
television.
Yeah, but you were
Only
in
one
public
so
you could read something a little bit.
There was no telephones. There was no electric. There was no sewage system. There was no water system. I had to bring home the water, and you had a basin where a barrel with water, and that's how you wash yourself. We had no heat. We lived in a cold house. You see this house, the only time when my parents put up, I'm talking winter, a little heat, was in the bedroom. They set up a special oven and with a little bit coal, only to go to bed. Otherwise, I got up in the morning and the barrel water was frozen on a towel. And it was nothing wrong, it was normal.
So you had no idea what was going on out.
But you never went to other places, no. Well, every town wasn't the same. The only thing, a big city had already electricity.
But no newspapers, you couldn't read the newspaper.
There was a Jewish newspaper came out a few years before the war, I remember. And there was one man, it was a weekly paper. So one man, a young man got the paper. But the paper went from person to person. When he finished it, my father sent me over to bring him the paper. So he was reading the paper. So they read the news, but it was 4 weeks ago. Like it was, I remember my father read the news that someplace was an earthquake. You know, they called it an air finish. He read it, and my mother listened. And they were so surprised. But this was already 6 weeks ago. It was the news. Now, when my father finished it, I had to take it over to another man. It went like 10, 15 people. Then the last one had to give it back to the owner. The newspaper. But this was only certain people. News was only when you went out to evening to the government. You know, every evening at the month. You asked, is it Muslims? Nah, yes, what is news? You asked people, what is news? And they told you what is news. That's how the news went. You know. It's very hard to explain.
So you mentioned a little bit about electricity, that there was nothing. Had you ever seen a car?
We had a bus. No. There was no cars. Only horse wagons with wagons.
Trains?
There was a train went through our town, I think once a day, but nobody went by train. Everybody, there was a train from our town to the Tarnova, but nobody, because a train was $1.40, a zloty 40, and by horse wagon was 50 groschen. And the Jewish people, there was 4 people who made a living every morning to line up the wagons. A horse wagon took 8 people. Because 9 people, 3 and 3 and 3. It wasn't even covered. When the rain came down, you got soaked in bed. The gypsies had covered wagons. But the other people that did it wasn't important. I remember I went once to Tarnova with a horse wagon, and it started to rain. And I was sitting in the middle, and a woman next to me was sitting. I was a young boy. I was bashful to say something. She had an umbrella. She had the umbrella, and the whole water went on me. But I didn't say anything. I was afraid to say anything. I was 13 years old, you know.
So when was the first time that you left the shtetl and went to the bigger city? You remember?
By 13, to Tarnova.
Okay, to Tarnova.
And by 14, I came back home.
Okay.
In Tarnova,
that was when you went to...
I saw Tarnova. I was all a year in Tarnova.
What was it like?
Tarnova was a regular big city.
Right, but so when you went, how did you feel?
Nothing, we didn't.
Was it like an unbelievable experience?
No,
or it wasn't like being in Times Square for the
No, it didn't matter. I had seven people, both were seating, because I was working. My brother was above the Chusit, the oldest brother, and he came home, so they sent me away. They couldn't afford to keep everybody home because they couldn't afford to eat to feed everybody. You know, children, they send away children because they couldn't afford. It's very hard to explain because you didn't get food how much you wanted. You got only food so much. You know, this is what you're going to eat.
So were people, you said you're.
Maybe that's why I survived the camps, because I was used to eat very little. But whoever came from a better home, who had enough more eat, didn't last long. Didn't last long. Most of the people who came from homes where the family had enough to eat, meant if somebody had enough to eat, that means how much you want to eat, they were considered wealthy. Vernuze bereider, they used to say, vernuze bereider. Because mostly families, as far as I know, only received so much. So we were, when we were in concentration camps or working camps, these boys who came from families who had better didn't last long. Only boys like me. That was okay. And I had to watch for my brother because I was with him in the first camp was a very bad camp. And it's a whole story because the first camp, I got, they disliced us, you know, because we had too many lies from the same clothes that they caught us in the street. That time wasn't yet the order that they're going to kill the Jews. I could write home, they could send me some bread from home, but they didn't have it. And that's what I was caught with my older brother. And luckily, that he got sick on typhus. He first, and then me, and they two truckloads. You see, it wasn't yet an order that they're going to kill everybody. So I still had my parents' home in this house, where I just showed you. My older brother, all of a sudden, I worked in a different area because they made groups to work, you know, every morning, 6 days a week. And he worked in a different area. They built it, the assess, they assessed, built it for themselves, housing. This was before the war with Russia even. They never thought, they thought the war was over already. They want to bring their families.
Let's back up 1 second because we'll get to all of that. But I want to ask you. I want to ask you. I know that is the Israel and you know what is now Israel was Palestine back then in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
What was your knowledge of Israel, or what was to be Israel at that point? I know that a lot of times there were people who from the Jewish agency they would go out and they would try to recruit people to make aliyah and try to get people to come and there was no knowledge of.
It wasn't a Jewish country. It was still Palestine. There was a few people from our town who went to Palestine.
They did.
Yeah, they were serious. The Hasidim didn't.
They weren't interested.
No, not to go.
Right.
You couldn't go. I was a young boy, a child, but I grew up with only boys maybe who were already in the 20s. So
Right.
And then they, from poor houses, they tried to go.
So when war started coming, how did everybody sort of find out that there was a war? And when did you start? When did the town start to change? When did your neighbors start treating you differently? You know, when did things start to change in your town and you felt?
The anti-Semitism got very bad.
Okay.
When Hitler came to power, there was
in the early 30s.
Yes, so it got more and more anti-Semitic, against the Jews.
Mm-hmm. Was there always a bad relationship between the Jews and the
No,
non-Jews?
it wasn't so much. I can't remember. Now I was a kid, so I don't know. But I remember they talked also already that's going to be a war. And then all of a sudden, I didn't know that anything about Germany, that they went to Austria and then Hitler. I didn't know how we should talk about Hitler. I remember there was a talk going on, and that was all.
Right.
So I remember that the week already, when Hitler had speeches already against Poland, there was one man not far from our house who he bought a radio. The radio was only on the whole town. He said, not a Jewish man. He set it up on the window.
They're filming you. It's okay.
He set it up on the window, and he put it up. The Jewish people got outside to listen. He put it on Hitler's speeches from Germany. You know, he had a big antenna on the roof, I remember. So then when the Germans attacked, we knew it's the war. Then a week later they came to our town.
Okay.
They attacked September the 1st, and this was a Friday. And the next Friday evening they came into our town. And luckily, a lot of Jewish people ran away. There was plenty of people came to our town. They didn't go any further. They from other places. They couldn't go no further. People were on the streets sleeping.
Were people scared? Did they?
Sure.
They didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
So,
Nobody knew they were going to kill everybody.
right.
But when they came in the beginning, it quieted down. And later we found out that whoever ran away, they lined up. The Russians occupied that area of Poland.
Right.
They told Poland to put a stand down there when the Russians came from the other side. So, but once they were on the other side, they remained until they made up their minds. They come back home from our hometown. They closed the border already between the Germans and the Russians. And whoever wanted to come home couldn't come back. There was a few people who they had, wives and children, young men who they couldn't come back home. But then it stabilized already. They gave an order. 3 weeks later, they gave an order. Jews have to wear an arm. Then.
So the Polish army wasn't conscripting Jewish men?
The Polish took we had Jewish people to the army, but there was no Polish army.
They just totally was destroyed, right?
Poland didn't even fight. They didn't put up a fight. They ran and ran and ran, and they wind up on the Russians. The Russians took them into prison.
Right.
There was no fight. The Germans kept on going like nothing. They bombed, but the Jews opened back the stores. The farmers started to come back to town to sell their stuff. There was no more schools for Jews.
Okay.
And Jews were not allowed to go no more to Dublin and Smedovishal and the Shuren and wherever we used to do it. Everybody was afraid to go. So I remember a Jewish man not far from my house. He lived the dying. We were davening for him in the house.
Mm-hmm.
This went on like this for the whole time we was home. Later they gave orders that Jews cannot go outside unless they have a permission.
Mm-hmm.
So the people who made a living with the horses wagon, they got a special paper that they can travel to Tarnova.
Okay.
And people who needed to go to Tarnova to buy the merchandise with stores had to get a permission from the German.
How old were you when this was all
I was
happening?
15 years old. Yeah.
So you were it's not like you were 5 years old and you were unaware of what was going on.
No,
You
but
were
15
very
years
aware
old. I know what
of what was going on. So how long was it by the time the Germans entered your town and then did they start deporting people, or what was
Not
what
right
was the
away, no. They was only took some Jewish people away. There was one family, I can't remember the name. They had about 3 sons. They had their own house right across from the Polish police station. Now, when the Germans came in, they took over the police station. This was they went to the river a little bit out of town. all of a sudden, it looks like this was yet before that they didn't take just people away for nothing.
Mhm.
It looks like the German took over this police station. They had some Poles collaborators with them. Either they didn't want to have a Jewish person should live across from the police station. You know, they had a business that they sold wholesale flour. They brought it from Tarnova. Tarnova was a big mill that all the flour they supplied the mill. They supplied flour because from our town they took the grains to Tarnova, and from Tarnova they brought in. Now this man who dealt with flour, when my father needed flour, he took grain and they exchanged flour for grain, you know, so and so much. But anyway, he was still doing the business. It looked like they couldn't take it. So one morning, I remember, I was still home. One morning, they went in and they said, the police,
The Germans or
German
the Poles?
police,
Okay,
it was a Pole with them,
okay,
a Polish guy,
okay.
because he's the one who walked around with them. The German police were mainly from who spoke Polish. They were ethnic Germans from the area there, from the German. They always spoke, but they only had one German, the chief, a policeman who didn't speak Polish. It was a live German. That means a real German. That one, they're Germans,
Right,
but
they were-
ethnic Germans.
Yeah.
They had different uniforms. They searched his house. They couldn't find anything. All of a sudden, they went into to the outside. They, you know, outside, everybody had a half house. Not everybody. You had to be a bed off. They had it, my father, in the yard. They went to the art house. They opened the art house, and the art house had a little attic down there on the top, you know, it was like this. And they brought down an old gun from World War One, you know, the real, and they claimed that he had a gun, and he weren't allowed to have guns, and that was because it was his gun. He didn't put up the gun there on the outside on the art house. They must have put it up a day before, and he didn't even know it. And then the next morning they came to search. They took away first of all him and the three boys, you know, to jail. What happened? This was still, you know, maybe a few months only after, you know, when they occupied already. Then all of a sudden, everybody started to go. They released the three boys, and they kept him. They said that he has to be put to jail because he was planning against the Germans. They sent him away, and nobody knew where to. 3 weeks later, my father, I remember, said that we have to go there for Davenon because they have to say Kaddish for him. What happened? They sent him to Oshinshin, this is Auschwitz. This was in the beginning, and it looks like they killed him there, and they sent it home some ashes. They claimed, yeah, they sent it back home some ashes from him. They claimed that they burned him there, but they sent it back home the ashes. Who knows whose ashes? And that's how we went there for a whole week. My father and he took me also to go there. They needed me for prayer, you know, in the morning and at night. This I shall never forget, because they couldn't take that a Jewish person should live like across things. Later, I don't remember what happened to this. This was in the beginning. You know. But then,
How did people get flour now if he wasn't?
well, you could buy on black market.
Okay.
On black market, but later they gave cards to be able to buy bread. They gave cards to be able to buy bread. So they gave for each person in the house 7 decogram a day.
They were giving rations.
Rations, yeah, they gave you cards, and the Jewish bakers received the flour to bake the bread. When you could buy bread only at 7 decagram. So let's say my family had 4 people, because my oldest brother was away, 4 people, so they got cards for a whole week. 4 times 7, 28 decal. Do you know how much this is? Almost nothing. And then she usually took only once a month. She bought. I remember she could buy 2 breads with these cards, and they didn't give you anything else unless you had money to buy it.
Were the Poles rationed also, or just the Jews?
No, I don't remember. I can't remember. Poles, maybe from the town. This is what Jews. Only the Poles they got everything. You know, they gave only. And this was 1940, beginning end of 40, and by end of 40, they surrounded the town. The SS, because they wanted to build for themselves housing. This was the first camp where they captured me and my brother, and this was the camp. He got titles and I got titles.
So they brought you to a camp from
Domnova. They caught us in the streets just like this.
how long did it take from when the war started until they started to take you?
Oh, this was already probably a year, maybe. I was at home. I think I must have been a whole year.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. This was already late.
Do you remember the name of the camp, the first camp?
Yeah, this was Pusko.
Pusko.
This wasn't yet, they didn't have yet many of those concentration camps. This was set up by the you see the SS had were stationed there in the little town in Pusko. Pusko, the Gnomes, how they call it.
Was it close to you? Was it close to
No, it wasn't that close because it was further than Tarnova. They had to go through Tarnova. No, wait a minute, Pusko. I can't remember, not far from Mielec, I think. Because they took us by truck, you know.
Was this camp that you were in, or any of the camps that you were in, were they near Polish villages? Meaning, I asked
They
specifically.
were actually,
People knew.
by the name of the villages, sure they
Right.
were villages. But this place, the camp, every morning they took us out to work groups. The SS lined up.
This is the first camp.
This was the first camp. My brother's job was to dig out the stumps. When there was groups who cut the trees because they wanted to build for themselves a road in the woods and housing for the families. And this was the first camp.
Were your parents there as well?
My parents were home, yeah.
They were still home, so they just took.
Oh yeah, just young boys. They didn't take older people.
So it was a work camp. It wasn't concentration camp.
This wasn't. But they didn't call it that concentration camp. This is boys yet. I'm not getting boys. But the only thing you could write home, they could write to you, come home. I will tell you a story that's just hard to believe. While I was with my brother in this camp, we knew that my mother, and in the winter, it fell in the winter. And we knew my mother had no shoes. And how was she going to go out in the street? The shoes what she had fell apart already. So we had there another boy that he was working on the German post office. So I said to my brother, I asked him if he could send a package home from the post office to my parents. So me and my brother took our portion bread and we bought a pair of shoes in the camp. You know, they were a warehouse. They had some shoes there. All of a sudden, one boy had a beautiful pair of shoes, brand new. And he said he will sell it to us for two portions bread. We didn't eat the stated bread. We took our bread and we bought the shoes. Because another boy told us that he can send it out because he works on the post office. we packed together those shoes, good, me and my brother, and we gave it to this boy, and this boy took it there, and he sent it home. Later, when I was home, I saw my mother wearing those shoes. And it's unbelievable. From the camp, we sent it off.
How long was it? How long was it before you went back home? How long were you in that
Oh,
camp?
I was
Or did
there
you
at
go
this
to
time more than a year. You see, it got very too many lies. The war was already broke out already they attacked already the Soviet Union, and I was there. They were already deep in Russia at that time. And then we had so many lies that was unbelievable because we wore the same clothes, but they caught us at home in the streets. So they made one Sunday at the slicing. They brought some kind of a little house. And one Sunday morning, Sunday we didn't work. We took off our clothes with everything. We hung it up on hangers and we rolled it into that little place. They didn't take the whole everybody in one time. They had so many people, but they sliced in one day all of the people. While they put in gas, a certain gas to kill the lice and the clothes. In the same time, when they brought in when they it took a half an hour only. We went in for this half an hour to shower. There was a shower room they made, and it was winter because I remember the snow was laying outside, and we had to take off the clothes outside in the snow. Then when we came out from the shower, we rolled back out the hangers to outside. Another group went in. So everybody took back their clothes. And we couldn't go back to the barracks because once you went into the barracks, you died because the gas from the clothes was so. I was outside the whole afternoon. I waited till it got very dark. They said, you can't go in all that. And it was still full of gas, the clothes. Well, that time I must have been already about 16 and a half, 17 or whatever.
So they let you go home?
No, not home, in the barracks, in the camp.
No. After you finished in the camp.
No, wait, let me tell you how it happened. Then, after the entlassing, an epidemic broke out with typhus. All of a sudden, 10 people got typhus. I come home from work, and I used to get together with my brother. He worked on a different group. And then we came back to our barrack, our place. I had the two places together to sleep. I washed out for him because that's how I was told from at home. I had to wash for him. I don't see it. And barely see it. Then one boy tells me, go take a look in that barrack where the sick people are. I go in there, he was there. He already had typhus. So I went to visit him. He couldn't eat no more, but they gave him still the soup. So he couldn't eat the soup, so I ate the soup. He took a little. 2 days later, I got sick. So I wound up in the same place. It was unbelievable, an epidemic. Every day, more and more people. They didn't have no room no more there in this barrack with all these sick people. You see, Tarnova, the big city next to us, was also close to this camp. In that time, wasn't yet that they're going to kill all the Jews. In Tarnova was still the Jewish hospital functioning. Tarnova had a hospital. Our town didn't have a hospital. It looks like they had so many people in that camp. It looks like the SS who were there didn't know yet that they're going to kill everybody. They didn't come yet. He was only interested to build the housing for themselves. There was like stuck there in this camp, and they made like huge homes there. They gave a note, they probably got in touch with that hospital in Tarnova that they should take off from them some sick people because there was no room anymore for more sick people. So one night a truck came from the hospital, a Jewish hospital, and they took a full truck, the back of the truck, but maybe how many could they take on a small pickup truck? Maybe they had 20 people, sick people, you know. They took them to the hospital, but they didn't call me. You know, this was whoever was there from before. The next day, the truck came again to take out some people, and they called out names. And I waited, they should call my name, but I didn't hear my name. So as soon, when they kept on calling the names, people went down from the bridges, from the plane, and walked to the truck. I walked also. I didn't wait for the name.
And your brother?
This I didn't know that my brother was not there no more. I arrived in Tarnova in the hospital. I remember the nurses took us to a shower and to wash us, and they put us in a regular bed, and doctors came. You know, it was a regular hospital, Tarnova, at a big hospital. And I didn't know about what happened to my brother. All of a sudden, there was big rooms with big arches, but I couldn't see it into the other room. I heard a cough or a sneeze, I can't remember. And I recognized this as my brother's. He was in the other room, in Tarnov in the hospital. So I hollered in, Tom Simmerson, his name was Tom Simmerson. He was talking too. You're also here. Yeah, and he heard me. He said, it's so we were both in the hospital. I don't know how my mother found out. She must have found out from somebody that I had two boys out in the hospital. She went with a Volkswagen to Tarnova. But that time, if you didn't have a paper on the road, you know, that they let you go from the Dombrova to Tarnova, and they had already, they took you off and they shot you. She took a chance. She couldn't get the paper. She came, and she said she's the mother of the two boys, and she took us home. That's how I came. I was back home. I was 3 weeks with my brother also in the bed, I remember. And I remember when I went down from bed the first time, I had to hold myself to be able to walk. And then I recovered. 3 weeks I was in bed, and maybe another 3 weeks later already, maybe 3 weeks later or 4 weeks later, I was somewhere around 6 weeks in between. They came, and we knew already that in other towns, they surrounded the towns and they take people away. Not just to work like when they took me and my brother. They didn't take older people. They didn't take children. They take everybody. They're just going to a house. Whoever is there, whoever is running, they shoot on the streets. And I was home with my father. This was the house that saved me that time. That was the first action. They called it action. They surrounded the town. I must have been about 6 weeks in between the camps home. And they emptied out already a half a town. They had a lot of trucks. I couldn't see the trucks. We went up, my father went up on the attic. You see, in the take another floor. In the back of the house, that you don't see it on the picture, was the area where we had the grains. Mm-hmm. There was a door to go in there. So he went in, and the ceiling was raw, only balls. It wasn't a finished ceiling like in that part, like in the part of the house living. There was an opening between the balls. We had a big ladder. They had a ladder. You could go up on the attic. So he put up the ladder to the attic, and we went up on the attic. And then he pulled up the ladder into the attic, and they was laying 3 balls. The 3 balls you could lay down on the area where the opening was. When you looked from underneath, you couldn't tell. So we went out, we could hear shooting. This was one day I was somewhere by one action, they call it an action. And then it was unbelievable. Then around 11 o'clock, it was me. I said to my father, "Oi, you close, you see, when we went, before we went up to the attic, in the front door had two big louvers, to close for the night. I can show you where it was. To close for the night with a hook inside.
Okay, yeah.
You
like a
couldn't,
shutter.
and shutters, yeah. You couldn't open the hooks from the outside. So you closed the hooks. When I was sitting up there, I said, "Oh my God, they will see that people have to be inside because these hooks has to be closed from inside. So they're gonna search so long till they're gonna find us." And then I was afraid to go down. My brother was afraid. My father took away the three boats. He let down the ladder, and he went down. He went to the front door, opened the hooks to make it believe like that in other words, nobody is there, everybody ran out. And he went up with the ladder and pulled back up the ladder, put back. Maybe 15 minutes later, no more than 15 minutes later, we sit up there, we can hear somebody tries to open the door already. The hooks from the inside weren't open, but there was still a hook there that you could close and open from the outside. This he left it, make believe that beyond. And he could hear, then all of a sudden, he walked in, and I could see through the cracks. He walked into the area where the place where where the ladder they were sitting, and he walked around. He looked like this up, but he couldn't tell because the ceiling it was exactly like asphalt ceiling, closed all the way. He didn't show anything that there's an opening, and he walked back out. And that's how he didn't catch us. And then this was maybe around 12 o'clock.
Where was your mother?
My mother happens to be at home, and we didn't know what happened there. But all of a sudden, when this was finished, the day was finished, she came back home. She was hidden on the cemetery someplace. She happens to be on the cemetery, on the Jewish cemetery, and she was for praying, whatever. So I don't know, but she came home. We were back together. My oldest brother was away. He wasn't home. So what happened? In the evenings, they left with all the trucks filled up with people. Then we all came back out into the street. There was laying a lot of people who they shot in the streets. Jewish people, when they're running. I remember they dying next to us, so it was laying and was dying. And my father went with a few other people who were remained there. Houses were already completely empty. The doors were open. You could see that they took out everybody, the whole families. This was already for killing. And when I was home the 6 weeks, I had some friends from my hometown, my age, who were also in the same camp, Fusco. They also got sick. The only two transports that I took to the Jewish hospital was the two transports. One, the first one was my brother was on it, and the second one that I went up there by myself. When I wouldn't look out, I wouldn't be, because they didn't call my name. Later, when other people got sick, they must have got the order that they're going to kill already everybody. They didn't send no more to the Jewish hospital. Whoever recovered had to go back to work, and whoever died, died. Because a mother from one of the boys told me, and this was a friend of mine, that he also was sick on typhus, and he remained there. So this was the only two transports who they brought to the hospital, and I was on the second one. Later, when the job was finished there in this place, they killed everybody. They didn't send him to another camp. So when I wouldn't been from the sick ones, I wouldn't be, you know. And there was one guy, a collaborator with the Germans. Yeah. His name was Bitkover. A Jew. A very bad guy. He was worse than myself. And he gave me 50 on my behind for no reason whatsoever. He was worse than the SS. In the camp in Tusko. Bitkover, later, and tell you what happened to him. When they killed everybody, they didn't kill him. They sent him to another camp, Yelets. I was, this was the third camp where I was. And I came to Yelets, and I see this guy walks around like a big shot. I said, what is this? He didn't know me because he was the big shot in the whole camp, but I know him. And I asked my cousin, what is this guy doing here? This is what did cover from Putzko. He told me they finished the housing in Putzko, so they killed out all of the Jews, and him they brought there, and they made sure that he should be a big shot there also.
Did he have a family?
I don't know.
But he was from your town?
No, he was
not
from
from your
another
town?
town.
Okay.
They had their people from other towns. The funny thing was, after I was in this camp for more than a year, the Russians chased back the Germans. They came close to Warsaw, and they stopped by Warsaw, the Russians. And the Germans thought that they're gonna liberate our area. So about 6 weeks before, when I was, let me tell you how it happened. After the action, those things came on order that they leave people in a camp for working. Everybody wanted to go, whoever was still there. Yeah, but they didn't take everybody. They only needed like 100 people, or maybe 80 people, or maybe even less. They took me, but they didn't take my brother. This was the second camp. This was called Chechu. This was more like an open camp. We didn't have any guards, any SS men. The first month they gave us a paycheck. The company needed workers, so they gave them the workers, the Jewish workers. But they had a separate kitchen for us. After the first month, no more paychecks for us. We worked with non-Jews, with Poles. Went every morning, went to work, no guards, no nothing. Like a regular worker, but wasn't enough to food. The paycheck was good because we could go out and buy bread in a Polish store there. This was Chechu. And they were very satisfied. The company, the engineer was very satisfied from the Jewish workers.
What were your parents?
My parents, let me tell you, when I went to Chechu, when they took me, after 3 weeks, they took us home to see the family, the company. We never heard anything like it. So they took a big, those flatbeds, they had, I think, a bulldozer. This was like a tractor. And they took a German, not a German, an ethnic German, a civilian, because he brought the German, the band, the swastika. And he drove us home on Saturday afternoon to our town. He drove through the big city. He had to go through. It took us a few hours to go. This was very slow.
Right.
We were sitting on that flatbed.
What year was this? What year? Now?
This had to be already 43 or 42. Can I tell you exactly the? I don't know exactly the year, but we didn't count. We didn't count.
As compared to other cities?
No, this was already when they emptied out to kill all the Jews.
No, but to give you the free time off to take you back is very.
No, this was Sunday, no. Saturday afternoon, they took us to Dombrova. We should stay at home. This was from the company. We had no guards there. It was open. We had 2 barracks. From Brigi, Rzeszów, was one group, and the other only from 2 towns, from our town. The ones from Brady was very close, so they took them home every weekend. Certain boys, they asked, they said, we can only take you home at least in 3 weeks. They took us home. I found my parents 3 weeks later, a Saturday afternoon, but I didn't find my brother anymore. I asked my parents, where is Hamsulchan? The older brother, they said that they needed workers in Mielec, in the other camp, that I was later. There wasn't too many boys left, so they took him. But my parents were still home, in the same house still. But my father told me within the 3 weeks that I wasn't home yet, there was another action. They again banned it out to whoever they could. They must have been again in the attic, hiding in the attic. Then 3 weeks later, we went over to the who was in charge and the company who built it, this hydroelectric plant by the Dunayes, by a river Dunayes. And he asked them, they should. There's no more Jews in this town. Everything was finished. And I never heard from my parents anymore. I found out what happened. My mother, they gave an order, there was a few people left. So they gave an order that they should move only to one corner. Then after this, there was a few people left. They gave them an order they should move to Tarnova. They should go to Tarnova, and that was my older brother came home with my mother. They went to Tarnova because I received yet one postcard from Tarnova to the camp, to this camp, Jehu. But my mother didn't write that. It was my brother wrote it. I knew something happened to my mother because my mother was the writer. My brothers wouldn't write. My father wasn't a writer. Everything that was written was always in Jewish postcard. In this postcard, wrote my oldest brother. So he wrote that they were both sick and typhus. You know, my mother. And I couldn't read much. We scribbled already. And I never hear from them because they emptied out the big city already 2 weeks.
Did they send them to Warsaw?
No, these people.
Or they just
These
shipped
people,
everybody right out?
when they took away the people, it wasn't.
That was it. They
Not
didn't even move
them.
them.
We didn't hear from them anymore.
That was
Nobody
it.
knows where they took them. Whether to Auschwitz or whether to kill.
You never heard from your brother again either?
Nothing. No, not from my mother, not from my mother, from nobody. From Tarnov also. But I knew that my middle brother was in Mielec.
Right.
Mielec was a camp. I was in this camp. They didn't pay us no more. Only one month's payment.
So you went from Chekova to Neil.
And I was in Shchub and he was in Mielec. Then in Shchub, we were there for a long time. The company needed us, you know, for the Luda work. They couldn't get enough Polish workers. We were working mixed, you know, with Poles. They went home. They lived maybe around nearby, and we went to our place. All of a sudden, one Sunday morning, the place was surrounded with Gestapo, different soldiers. We didn't know what happened. But Sunday morning, and there was one guy who they made him Judenältester. Judenältester means like he's in charge on the camps, on the Jews. One guy kept on saying, see, when it's meant to live, the Judenältester who was there the whole time, something happened that he complained a lot. So he complained, so they took him away. He shouldn't be anymore. And they made it. No, he didn't. Another guy complained on this Judenältester that he's not doing a good job. So he wanted to took away from this Judenältester. He became the Judenältester. And this was like 2 weeks before they took us out. All of a sudden, on Sunday morning, they surrounded the holy camp. The Judenältester, who was the whole year, was no more a Judenältester. He was only a worker. The guy who became the Judenältester, we didn't see him no more. they must have taken me and killed him. Because then he would be, you else to say, he would be killed. They always killed the head. They didn't see it no more. So they surrounded the town, asked the camp in the trucks, and they were very nice to us.
What were they doing with all these bodies? This wasn't a death camp, it was a work camp.
They
so
kept burned, everything was burned.
Everything was burned.
Yeah, I remember it was good. They brought 4,000 Russian Mongolian prisoners. That it took us one day away from our job in Puskov, because that time when the war broke out, they attacked the Soviet Union, and I was there. We had to build a camp in one day. It was unbelievable. I thought they were going to kill me. I was lucky. One of the officers gave me a horse through the whole day. That was saving me. Yeah, I should walk with a horse. They brought 4,000 Russian Mongolian prisoners. And little by little, they killed them all out. And we had to build them. It was winter, frozen. We had to take off the clothes from them and to throw them on the fire. The two people picked up, one picked up by the head, one picked up on the fire. I remember whoever they killed in the camp itself, when one escaped, sometimes I could escape. Where am I going to escape to? But I still had the parents home. I could escape. But they made a rule, if one escaped, two other guys will be shot from the same group. So they see, I was one of the little guy, and they were very cold, freezing, the SS, because they watched us. We had two SS men. So they sent me into the woods to bring out the rye branches to make them the fire. When I went into the woods, I could keep on going. But they would shot two other guys. I never escaped. Never thought of it. There was a father and a son. I remember the son escaped. He didn't come back, but they shot the father, and we had to carry him back. When they shot somebody, we had to carry him back, because the assessment said, if he doesn't bring back the full amount, we were counted, going, they counted us, marching back, they counted us. If one was missing, he had to have another one there, two people there. He had to show that he killed other people. It was unbelievable. So anyway, what I wanted to say, yeah, but then they were nice, they took us on trucks, and I thought they were going to kill us, because they didn't bother you, but it looked like they needed us in the other place, because they built it there, the airplanes, Heinkel 111s. There was my brother. They brought us there to the camp. And then I didn't find my brother no more. I found a cousin from my hometown, two cousins from another town that I never saw them before. But, they lived there. I knew her. And I asked them, where's my brother? They told me that they had a group of people that they claimed they made some sabotage by a plane. And they took a few people out to the woods and they shot them. So my brother was one of them. So I couldn't find my brother there no more. But this was the third camp. When the Russians came, they thought the Russians, before 6 weeks before, they changed the whole camp, and they made it for concentration camp. And they put up for everybody KL. I have it also here. It's very little visible here. KL. Mm-hmm. Can you see it? Mm-hmm. KL means Konzentrationslager in German. K is Konzentrations, L is Lager. That means concentration camp in America. So they put for everybody KL, and they brought a whole new different SS, different commanders, and different SS people, and took over the whole camp. And the conditions got better. It's unbelievable. When it was called working camp, very bad food. It was so bad that even Sundays I'd rather go to work than to be at home, because they grabbed you. They had Jewish police and this. But they changed it to concentration camp. The food got better, the conditions got better, They didn't bother you Sunday no more. This guy, the bit cover guy, who they brought over for folk, you didn't see him no more.
Really?
They died with him out. They killed him.
Really?
Looks like the new commander knew who this guy is, and the people know, and he brought a different commander, a Jewish commander under him, the assessment, a German Jew. Also, he was in the constellation then, but maybe he knew this guy from at home, who knows? A German Jew, he took over, and he had a big influence. He's the one who made that we should have it better. This German Jew must have been a friend from at home to the assessment who was in charge in the camp. But the food got so much better, unbelievably different. And the conditions on the work got better. But it didn't last long. It lasted only 6 weeks. After 6 weeks, they thought the Russians would eliminate us. They took us away to another camp.
How did they take you? Did they make you march? Did they take you?
No, that time I can't even remember whether they took us by train or by trucks. I think by train to Wieliczka. Wieliczka was further than Poland. They were salt mines.
Closer to the
To
Soviet Union?
the Germany, closer to Germany.
Closer to Germany?
Yeah, because the Russians, they wanted to take us away from the Russians. They shouldn't liberate us. They took us to Wieliczka. They said they're going to build the same factory in the salt mines, but they didn't do it. They couldn't do it. So I was in Wieliczka only a short time. My cousin from my hometown and the 2 other cousins who were with me in the same camp in Wieliczka. Wieliczka was like they brought from other places or other people to distribute them to other places. They lined up a Schindler. And they had it good the whole time. They were liberated by Schindler. I wound up in Germany. They needed in Germany workers who knows to work airplanes and build airplanes. Because this was a regular concentration camp that it was from before the war. I don't know which year Hitler made this concentration camp. This was in Flossenburg camp. When I arrived there with a group of Jews from this camp where we were, there was no Jews there yet. There was all the different nationalities, but not Jews. There was Russian officers, because they had their own, There was Germans even, There was from French, from Holland, from all of the Italian, from all over. We were the first Jews. So when they brought us over, and I still had my experience. When I went to the first camp, I took with me a little box with a twin, and I had them the whole time in Czechoslovakia, and I had them the whole time in Wielec, and I had them in Wieliczka, and I arrived with that little suitcase into Rosenborg with the twin, and I had in the suitcase some bread that I brought from before. It was moldy already. And I arrived there, they leave everything here, take off your clothes, you have to go into the shower. There I lost everything, the bread. And I remember when I opened that little suitcase, and there was some moldy bread, some Russians who were there. They were walking around there. They threw themselves in fight over that moldy bread. And I said to myself, oh, it's going to be bad in here. When I saw that they fighting over the moldy bread, I said, we went in, we took the shower. This was unpleasant. We came out, they gave us already different clothes. Not the striped clothes, we had regular clothes, but a big K was painted, a yellow K. And here, the L on the pants, and on the jacket, the same thing, a K and an L, yellow paint, in the back, the same thing. But whatever I had there, it was gone. And that's where they put me to work. There I was the whole,
Until the end.
Not till the end. The end was very bad because we were mixed up with all nationalities. We worked together, but with all prisoners.
Were you in Flossenburg?
In Flossenburg, yeah, I was there a long time. I don't know how I could live on this food for such a long time. I tried always to get jobs that they shouldn't be so physically. Always when they needed somebody, mechanical type of work, I put up my hand, I know how to do it. I know how to do it. This way I didn't put out so much strength. I was working by the assembly line. We built the Messerschmitt airplanes. They brought in already later, they're going to build another plane, the jet plane.
Did they do any sabotage on the airplanes, the workers?
If you would sabotage, they would kill off the whole group. One plane I made, I sabotaged a plane, but accidentally. Luckily, this was in Flossenburg. We built it in the assembly line. There was one German, a civilian German, who was in charge on the whole. Everything was done with prisoners. You know, the inspectors were prisoners, the ones in the warehouse were prisoners. So he comes over to me. I should go to it was a finished plane already, the Messerschmitt plane, almost ready to go out, to push out, finished. I think it needed to be painted yet. It wasn't spray painted yet. He tells me to go in with a hammer to hit. Maybe I didn't understand what he wanted. The ribs.
Speaking to you in German or in Polish?
German, German.
How did you?
I spoke German.
You did.
Similar to you with Yiddish. German Yiddish was almost the same. So I spoke right away German. So he told me to hit those ribs. The ribs shouldn't be like this. So I went in and accidentally, I didn't hit the rib. I hit the skin of the plane nearby. And this was very thin metal. The metal what they used for plane building was called dural. Dural was a mixture, aluminum with another mixture, light, but it was very brittle. And I hit it. And I finished playing. This I shall never forget. And it gushed out a big hole like this, a bit big. And I said to myself, but I went back out from the plane. Nobody saw it. And I went back to my job, what I was doing before. And I was looking what is going to happen to this plane. And I didn't know what is going to happen. I forget, they're going to find out I did it and they're going to kill me because sabotage. Then a little later, I realized that the same gentleman, Meister, a big shot, who he liked me. He was a civilian. He wasn't a prisoner. Stays like this, and he sees this. I saw it. He makes like this. Like, what happened? And he looks like he didn't want. There should be a big problem there. That should, He calls me over. He says, "Let's go. Let's fix this. I don't know what happened. Let's fix this." And he himself took the air hammer, the rivet hammer, and he brought a piece of tin, and I should go on the inside, and he drilled out the few holes through the piece of tin the inside. We bended it back, and he riveted it all around. And he didn't know. And he sent it back right away in the plane to be spray painted. And when I couldn't believe it. This was around in 1944, maybe around December.
We're getting towards near the end.
Well, it was still different. The airplanes flew over, and not just this. Outside was staying lined up, 30 and 40 brand new planes. But we finished every day 7 planes a day.
Wow.
7 airplanes a day. Later we made 8 and 9. They pushed us that they need more. And I remember we put into those ends, we made about 10 airplanes every day. I was on the assembly line. But it was starting up in the beginning, but the time it came out was finished to fly. So I remember American planes flew over day and night, and not a single bomb was dropped in the factories. But we could hear it.
We're getting a 3-minute warning from the rabbi. We're finishing up.
Okay. It was,
You are finishing.
and then the Americans were supposed to liberate the camp. They took out only the Jews into a train, and we were 10 days on the road. 10 days, only the Jews. The Americans, no, the Germans.
Germans took out only the Jews.
Yeah, we shouldn't get liberated. We
So where
shouldn't
did
get
they just put you on a train?
No,
and
they
just
took
let
us
you
on a
run?
train, they wanted to take us to Dachau. So we were shut up from American planes. The whole train was shut up. Tuesday, they took us out Sunday.
Why would the Americans shoot the
They
train?
thought we were sitting in those kettles wagons. Each wagon had 2 assessmen in the middle, and we were on both sides. When the planes came, they thought it's military planes. They shot through the whole plane. Then they shot also the locomotive. So they couldn't go no further. The steam went out. So the SS opened the doors, and they jumped out, and they said, "Don't you go out, because we're going to shoot at you." They jumped out, and the planes came back, and they thought it's a whole train, the military train. They shot us through the second time. Then we didn't listen to the SS no more. We jumped out. But meanwhile, we had out more than 20% dead already. So they brought another locomotive. Then the planes came back, and they shut up only the locomotive. They shouldn't take us further. Then we walked around outside. Then Thursday, they started again, and planes came again and shot us again. It was again more than half dead people. This was Tuesday and Thursday. Then they said we cannot go by train no more, we will have to go by walking. They made groups. Saturday we went out to walk, and we couldn't walk. Whoever couldn't walk fell down, they shot. This was Saturday. We arrived in a German farm in a barn. Half of it the Germans, the SS shot because they couldn't walk. One guy was holding my hand, and I thought he's going to pull me down, and then he fell down and shot him right next to me. This was Saturday, before liberation. We were in that barn on Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday a whole day, Monday a whole day. They couldn't take us no place no more. So Tuesday morning, they take us out, and they took us to the woods. And then all of a sudden, the SS disappeared. And the shooting was unbelievable. So I threw myself over to the American tanks into the jeeps. This was Tuesday. So we were on the road from Sunday to Tuesday. More than half got killed from the Jews. And the camp was liberated, I don't know, much earlier. The ones who remained in the camp, the non-Jews. This was in Stamm Street, I was liberated. The town was called Stamm Street. We were in the woods, It was very bad, the liberation. So that's how it was. And I was in Germany after.
So the last question that I wanted to ask Mr. Petersile is, the generation that's coming up today, the children, the young people, maybe my age, younger, do you have a message for anybody about just how they should deal with life? You have such a wonderful, positive outlook on life, even though you went through so many horrible things. Is there anything that you would say to all of us? Just, how we should look at life, how we should feel about things, what you learned through your experiences.
I don't know what to tell you. Try to do the best you can, and we have to be very careful. They shouldn't become a dictatorship, because once a country becomes a dictatorship, you cannot tell what is going to happen. See, we have to be very careful that they should be like they have it in the United States, separate powers. That's how Hitler could do all these things, because it was a dictatorship. Maybe there was some Germans. Yeah, one German wanted to save me while we were staying lined up to walk, and it was pouring and raining. Here was woods and here was a road. One German comes over to me. I don't know who he was, but he wore a uniform. And he says to me, "Go there. You wouldn't have to walk. We're going to take you by truck." And I said to myself, "Who are you kidding? You're going to take my truck?" Because I looked through the woods and I saw the people who are staying there. They were all like dead people, like head dead. I said, they're going to bother taking my truck. They're going to make a machine gun and shoot them out. So I kept on saying, no, I can walk. And he stood maybe 10 minutes by me. And he begged me to go there. And I didn't trust him. And I thought they're going to shoot out all these dead people there. After I was liberated, I found a guy. And he says, I told him the story how we had to walk. And they shot everybody who couldn't walk. He said, I didn't walk. I was scared. They took me by throat. And he said they took him by throat and they brought him to a barn. And they were liberated in the barn. They didn't even have to go Tuesday morning out like our group. So this German actually wanted to save me, because he kept on saying, "Go there, you're going to take him through." You know, in Germany talking, you know what's going to happen if you cannot talk. That's what he said, and I shall never forget this. This was Saturday evenings, things like that.
My friends, as we're just a few days away from the holiday of Pesach, and we say, and we celebrate the survival of the Jewish people, I don't think we can find a greater inspiration than Mr. Petersile and the people like him that went through such terrible difficulties, and they managed to inspire us on a daily basis, and it gives us faith that whatever difficulties can come our way, Hashem should help. We should have the perseverance, the wherewithal, and the cleverness that Mr. Petersile has and he shares with us. Please join me in giving a very, very big thank you to Mr. Petersile and to Hillary and to Judah for hosting. I'm sure we're all very, very grateful. Thank you so very much. I'm not sure how soon Mr. Petersile has a few pictures on the computer that are actually filming, so everyone else stick around for another 2 minutes after we formally adjourn. Maybe he'll discuss those images. I'd like to also let you know that the Pesach is coming up. We'll have a communal Siddurim. If you are in need or you know someone that needs a Seder, there's some information on the table next to the refreshments. We also have, starting May 10th, a special 6-week series celebrating 50 years since the Six-Day War. If that's something that may interest you, please take a look. And lastly, we have a pre-Passover women's event next Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. Please take a look, and the refreshments are still here. And again, thank you, Hillary, so much for taking the time to prepare and to allow us to have this wonderful and enjoyable meeting. Thank you very much.
I don't see the question. I don't know.